Welcome, everybody, to the Sex Magic of Isis, Sexual Alchemy, Healing, and High Magic. My name is Akara Sophia, and I am a mystic, a spiritual teacher, an initiated tantrika, and the guardian of a lost ancient Egyptian temple arts tradition connected to primarily to the goddesses of, or the mysteries of Hathor and later Isis. And in this call, we are going to be diving into the lost sacred sexual magic rites of the Isis temples, how that operated in the ancient world, what was the sex magic of Isis, what were the initiations and some of the foundational principles of this practice, how the Isis temples fell. And really, this call is really intended for those that have a connection to Isis and a connection to those Isis temples, how you can really recognize if perhaps in your past lives you were an initiate in the Isean mysteries, what that means for you in your present day life, body, relationships, and possibly even work and your divine calling. And so we're going to be also be talking about the shift of the ages that we're in now, and some prophecies around the return of Isis and why some of these lost fertility goddess and these lost sacred sexuality traditions, which are focused on things like healing and things like healing land and the earth as we're in this period of the earth changes, why they're so significant and how to bring them back forth in this age and for this time. So at the very end of this presentation, I will be sharing with you guys some opportunities to do that, to come into a training in the Sex Magic of Isis Mysteries, and also an invitation to join me in Egypt in 2025 for a full initiation like through the temples on the banks of the Nile. If you're interested in that, stay tuned. And with no further ado, I am going to dive into our presentation for today. Okay. Okay, so the sex magic of Isis, sexual alchemy, healing, and magic. The intentions and the goals for this presentation, this is what we're going to be covering here today. Number one, what is the sex magic of Isis? Number two, all about the Isis temples and their pathways of initiation. Number three, what happened to the Isis temples? What problems are we experiencing on Earth as a result of that? Number four, how to recognize what signs are there if you are an Isean initiate. And number five, how empowerment and the sex magic of Isis can support you in today's time, and how you can support the Earth, our civilization, the collective experience that we're going through right now in the prophetic return of Isis, which will go over what those prophecies are and the import of them in our time now. So, what is the sex magic of Isis? I'm going to give a very broad definition here. And what I really want you to recognize is that the Isis temple is really, really, truly an interdimensional soul path. It's a pathway of the soul and spirit, to essentially what we'll learn is in the rites of divine embodiment. But there is hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sex Magic of Isis, Sexual Alchemy, Healing, and High Magic. My name is Akara Sophia. I am a spiritual teacher, an initiated tantrika, and a guardian of the temple arts of ancient Egypt, particularly those connected to the temples of Hathor and Isis. And this call is an activation in the lost sacred sexual magic traditions of the Isis temples, and really an exploration of the deeper mysticism of the fertility goddess. And I almost would say, like, the lost fertility religions. Sometimes I like to call those the first people's religions here on this planet, and what they were for, some of the foundational principles of the sex magic of Isis as a practice, as a ritual practice, as a soul path, and as I guess you could say, like a powerful tool for things like physical healing, or healing and clearing and restoring lands. Certainly, obviously, sexuality is so important in terms of our emotional health and the fulfillment of our purpose through relationships, creation and stewardships of families, of marriages, home life. So we're really going to be diving into these teachings of the Isis temples and what the sex magic of Isis was. And for those of you who are interested in going deeper on that journey in terms of activating this sexual magic within you, at the end of the call, I'm also going to be discussing some ways that you can do just that. We have a training program coming up, and also an opportunity to join me in Egypt with live initiations and trainings in the temples. So if you wait until the end of the call, I will tell you guys more about that. And with no further ado, let's go ahead and dive into our presentation today. Okay, I don't know if that... So the sex magic of Isis, sexual alchemy, healing, and high magic. My goals for this seminar are to help, first and foremost, just frame what is the sex magic of Isis, and then to dive into the Isis temples, the Isis mysteries, and her unique pathways of initiation. What happened to the Isis temples, what problems resulted from that, and signs to recognize if you are an Isean initiate. So how empowerment in the sex magic of Isis can support you in today's time. So what is the sex magic of Isis? Number one, the sex magic of Isis is a set of sacred sexual rites, wisdom teachings, and ritual practices of the Isis temples. And so the Isis temples, will get a little bit into this more as we go further in our presentation. Isis, I oftentimes call the temples of Isis the world's first universal religion. This goddess was everywhere, all across the ancient world. We might say that she was one of the most popular ancient religions. There were temples of Isis on like North Africa, Middle East, the Mediterranean, and all the way up in through Northern Europe. So it's significant because unlike Christianity or Islam, the Isis religion did not spread through conquest. It did not spread through um, essentially forcing populations to convert to this religion. Although I would say that it's because of the Roman and the Greek and the Persian and the different empires that were present during that time that certainly opened and started connecting those lands. But Isis, her religion spread. I'm gonna stop that. Okay. So, what is the sex magic of Isis? The sex magic of Isis is a set of sacred sexual rites, wisdom teachings, and ritual practices of the Isis temples. And so I'm going to make a distinction in this presentation between the history of the religion in terms of the cult of Isis and all of the temples on the earth, and the temple of Isis, which is really, really, truly the inner spiritual path and the inner dimension of grace, of goddess that is holding this eternally, holding these mysteries and holding these teachings eternally as an offering of grace, and for those souls that want to walk that path also as a pathway of soul development, spiritual awakening, union with the divine. So we'll go back and forth between those two things in this presentation because sometimes it is important to learn about the histories and the temples and what took place on earth. And also, it's important that we recognize that the goddess is infinite. She's beyond the name of Isis. She is an eternal principle that is really within all things and really within all worlds. So, these are the sacred sexual rites, wisdom teachings, and ritual practices of that universal spiritual mother force. Okay. They might not be exactly the same, i.e., as what was being taught in the ancient world, most of which we've actually lost. So I want to make that clear. Um, but even within that interdimensional spiritual temple of Isis, there are multiple crafts. So there are multiple practices, there are multiple skill sets. The Isis temple holds the rites of marriage, of midwifery, of sexual energy cultivation practices, love spells, hieros gamos rituals. So you can think of these are really truly like art forms for working with sexual energy in a sacred way, that is really deeply aligned with source and with specific purposes and intents. So a midwife obviously has the purpose of delivering a child. A love spell has an intended purpose of calling forth a partner. Sexual energy cultivation practices, they can have many different purposes. It could be for healing a disease. It could be for extending your lifespan. It could be for preparing the body to be able to hold higher frequencies of light, of sakem flow. Like you're building your system to be able to anchor in like more powerful sacred energies. So there's different purposes for different practices. And then there is kind of the soul path at the center of the sex magic of Isis, which is really, really, truly that there is a mystery school of the soul and spirit whose ultimate purpose is to awaken the secrets of divine embodiment, or to bring about divine embodiment, or what they call in the Taoist traditions of the East, immortality. So all sacred sexual traditions, not just those from Egypt, but if we go and we look at the tantras in the East, in India, in Tibet, if we go and we look at the Taoist traditions from China, and probably other lost traditions, what I want to say is that the sexual priestess, the sacred sexual arts, they were typically held um, by the divine feminine. Number one, they're definitely held by goddesses. In any culture that you approach them through, you will see that they are anchored in and through a divine feminine aspect of the Godhead. In the East, in China, that is the goddess of the West. So she's usually a goddess that is associated with the principle of passion, and also with the principle of life, the principle of the life force. And so a lot, I would say almost the primary, well, I'm going to go to another slide. I would say that one of the primary purposes for these sacred sexual mysteries is for health, cultivating health and vitality, extending lifespan, and healing disease. So if you look into the sacred sexual traditions wherever they are found, that was one of the purposes of these temples. If you go to the Temple of Hathor, you will see there is a huge, essentially a hospital. There's a hospital on the ground. They call it the Temple of Life, but it was where people would stay, and they would stay for long times to be healed of different diseases. If you look at the Taoist traditions of sacred sexuality from the East, a lot of those practices are like prescriptions. It's like work with your partner this way, do this many pumps under this moon, something. I'm talking about sexual intercourse here. And it's for healing gout, or it's for healing this, or it's for healing this. And this is how you do it if you want to heal that particular disease. So I want us to really recognize that, because it's not often taught that way in a lot of the neo-tantric circles, that physical health and healing was always a very, very, very big part of these mysteries. And also, most of the sacred sexual priestess, I guess you could say, cults, one of their primary purposes, whether they were in Egypt, whether they were in China, whether they were in India, is that they were devoted really truly to the life of the pharaoh or the emperor, and also the stewardship of those bloodlines. So, i.e., they were devoted to healing and extending the pharaoh's lifespan, and also to the conception and the birthing and the stewardship of the lineage of the divine king. So there's always been a deep connection between the sacred sexual priestess and a form of a kind of like sacred royalty. And so that's why I oftentimes say that the sacred sexual priestess traditions are royal lines, they're royal lineages. And the queen in most ancient cultures, but certainly in Egypt, the queen of Egypt, the queen of Babylon, the queen of Sumeria would have been considered a form of Hathor, a form of Ishtar, a form of Inanna. So Ishtar and Inanna being other fertility goddesses, and she would be the high priestess also of the main temple. So I'm going to go back to this slide. The priests and priestesses of Isis, so not necessarily the high priestess who's the queen, but those that would be serving in the temples, upheld all the individual crafts and practices, both as service to their civilization. So, people might come to the temple of Isis wanting to conceive, wanting to improve their fertility. They might come to the temple of Hathor needing to be healed. So the priests and priestesses would hold the different rituals and the different rites that were needed to heal disease, to conceive children, to establish sacred marriages and whatnot. And also, all of those paths and practices would also be inner pathways of almost like mystery school development for the souls of those priests and priestesses as well. And the highest rites of the temple of Isis were reserved specifically for the pharaoh and for his queen. And as I said the queen would be considered a living form of Isis or living form of Hathor. And the pharaoh was a living form of Horus or living form of Osiris. And that's because the highest rites of sacred sexuality are about bringing the energy of a deity in and through anchoring deified energy in and through your physical embodiment. So again, they're connected to royal lines. They're connected in the ancient world. Most ancient communities all around the world saw the king and the queen as forms of the divine. Now, in their evolution, like in India today, if you get initiated into tantric rituals that have sacred sexual practice, yes, you are also bringing a deity in and through your body. But the political role of that, the political state of being the ruler and everything that comes of that has now been retired, right? But in ancient times, it was there. And all of these rituals were really, really devoted to actually bringing the divine into human form. So divine, sacred, physical embodiment. And, I oftentimes will talk about how Miriam, the mother of Christ, Mother Mary, was an Isis initiate. She's essentially a divine embodiment of Isis, and her myths and her stories, the stories of her life, parallel all of the myths of Isis, as was Mary Magdalene. So both of them were capable of holding those highest states of the queenly divine embodiment. I'm just going to explain this point here. So there was the temple tradition in Egypt. Again, in the ancient times, pretty much all of this would be held by royals. Like all the highest rights would only be held by the pharaoh and the queen. And then all of the priests or the priestesses would be of noble descent. They would be nobility. So they would be essentially a lot of the other brothers and sisters and cousins from the royal family would play the role of the priests and the priestesses. What was very interesting is that under the Greek and Roman rule, the sex magic of Isis began to be spread. There were temples to Isis built all around the world. And because the Greeks were, they developed democracy, they were had a huge focus on education of the populace in their communities, because if you you needed to be educated if you were going to vote and participate in a democratic process. So it was actually the Greeks that began to spread the Isis mysteries through private mystery school activations to essentially non-royal lines and lineages then all around the world. Now, I showed this before. These are the 4 purposes of the craft, the sex magic of Isis. I like to put this into 3 main kind of trajectories. As I said, there's many different sex magic practices. So it's, sometimes I've seen the sex magic of Isis presented as one practice. This was usually from Tom Kenyon in his book, The Magdalene Manuscript. And that is really a channeling of like the highest, we would call it yoga tantra of the lineage that was done by Mary Magdalene and Jesus. So there would be a lot of other practices. There would be a lot of other crafts that would also be held within the wider scope of the sex magic of Isis. And if we looked at those crafts, we would see that they have 3 main trajectories that they are anchored in. Number 1 is the stewardship of lineage and sacred family systems. So marriages, partnerships, the conception and the birthing of children, and the stewardship of, in particular, the sacred bloodlines of the pharaohs. Now, I put manifesting in there. Technically, manifesting, if there was a 4th line, it would be magical, manifesting through sex energy transmutation, which we're actually even aware of in our present time. Napoleon Hill, in his book, Think and Grow Rich, he has a whole chapter on sexual energy transmutation and how having a strong, essentially from his perspective, a strong wife that you're deeply in love with, and the devotion from that, and the anchoring of one's sexual energy as a man from that, how it contributes to being able to accomplish big things in what he was writing on, which was manifesting and wealth. And so not only that way of manifesting, but ancient Egyptians were sorcerers and sorceresses. So also actual manifestation rituals can be done through sexual magic as well. I'm putting this under lineage and family, though, because my personal philosophy is that manifestation is an aspect of nurturing, the family line, the family system. It's an aspect, even if you're a single, even if you even if you don't have children, even if you don't have a partner, it's part of your integration with the world around you and your contribution and connection with humanity around you. So it's really part of sourcing the sacred family system of human consciousness. But technically, you could say manifesting might be like a green arrow here. It could be a fourth line. I want to define it within the scope of love and sacred relationships because I think we really need that at capital, like end stage capitalism. So I'm putting it there under lineage and family. Health, as I said, a lot of these practices were specifically for healing disease, were specifically for extending lifespan. They're specifically for increasing your vitality. And that's something I really want to talk about as we get into how these rights can apply to us today as men, as women, but especially, so many women are suffering from chronic illness, from mystery illness, from hormonal imbalance, from low energy, fatigue, brain fog, different like real loss of health and vitality in your system. And a lot of these practices are incredible for restoring health and vitality and learning to channel sexual energy to clear different unconscious energies in the body and to bring about flow to different organ systems and to work with sexual energy elementally so that you're balancing your constitution, all of these things. It's so powerful. So it's really, really, truly a complement to our health throughout our life. It's a complement to us looking and feeling our best, staying youthful and vital as we age, being fully engaged in embodiment all throughout our lives. So it's a huge purpose behind the craft of sex magic is health. And then another one, this is also one I think is so important because I will sometimes see health and lineage and even manifesting talked about in most neo-tantric and sacred sexual communities. But we have to really remember this, that one of the main purposes of fertility rites and fertility rituals was for stewarding the health of the land, stewarding the fertility of the earth itself. And through the Isis temples, we have very specific rites and practices for clearing demonic energies from the land, from healing the land from war, healing the land from various conflicts that have taken place in it. And it's one of the reasons why I'm particularly passionate about bringing all this forward in our time, because the earth is being deeply infused with this. Really, it's a beautiful time. We're being infused with more consciousness. The light of our sun has gotten stronger. There is a big push for the awakening of human consciousness, and that is being done energetically through the fields of the earth. And it's bringing all the shit, all the shit of thousands and thousands of years of war and conquest and burning of books and loss of our ancestral memory and deep wounds and resentments and ghosts and tortured souls and tortured pain bodies of different racial and ethnic and national groups. It's bringing all of that up to the surface, all of that up to the surface. And it's manifesting in a kind of chaos principle. And I do believe I have been shown that there's almost like a war taking place. It's a war for the throne. It's a war for the future of this planet, just like Isis. When all that devastation happens between her husband and Set, and Osiris is gone, and she's got to go around and she's got to pick up the pieces and she's got to bring them back together and conceive the hero, Heru, her son, and go through all of that battle to restore the throne. Well, a lot of the Isis mysteries, sacred sexual practices, are specifically for healing the type of distortions that are erupting through the body of the earth at this particular time. So we do have particularly this in lineage, possibly even more so than Indian Tantra or, Eastern Taoist sex magic. I don't think they call it magic over there, but Eastern Taoist sexual practices. There is even more of a focus for this soul group in relation to this time. So, and on the wider level of that practice, this is about stewarding societies and sacred civilizations, because Hathor and Isis are empire goddesses. Hathor is a mother. She is a mother of civilization. And Isis is like a form of Hathor. She's like the human essence of Hathor. So a lot of these practices, it's like through the land, through the energy of the land, through the fertility of the land, through the healing of the land, we can very radically transfigure the consciousness of the society, the consciousness of the civilization. And that's where you get into the higher, or I guess you could say the highest part of this practice, which is the path of the king and queen, the rites of immortality. This is where part of that stewardship of the land, when we get into those sacred sexual mysteries and those sacred sexual ceremonies, and we're holding space for that, we start to really come into the king queen codes ourselves. We really start to anchor being the goddess, or being Horus, being the divine warrior king, the protector of the land, the protector of the culture, the protector of the planet, the planetary consciousness. And that's where the deeper spiritual rites of the Isis temples, which is around the cultivation of the soul, which is around the cultivation of divine human embodiment, self-realization, and essentially becoming a divine oversoul that is in devotion to the protection of life. That's kind of the highest realm of the mysteries. And I will talk more about what pathways of cultivation bring this out later in the presentation. So the king and the queen archetypes, these are the holders of the lineage. I like to say this, and I like to make a distinction here, because in present day time, there's a lot of influence in the West, New Age, neo-tantric, sacred sexuality world. We have a lot of influence from India. We have a lot of influence from the tantric traditions. And most of the tantric traditions in India are connected to like Shiva and Shakti. And Shiva, with his Shakti, he is really, like, he is a yogi. He is like not a part of civilization at all. He is like out in the wilderness. He is burning all the illusion away. He is the ultimate renunciant. And the tantric paths from India are really, really, truly devoted to a kind of like spiritual realization that is ultimately taking place through the pathways of renunciation and release from the responsibilities in some ways, or the burden of the world. Okay, I want to make this really clear. The Isis mysteries and the fertility goddess traditions from more of the Western hemisphere were more about the cultivation of service to the creation as a leader and an anchor and a holder of divine embodiment within your community. And because of that, a lot of the rites and the rituals were sometimes just really focused on helping people within their daily human lives, like helping people conceive a child, helping people heal from a disease they were facing. There's a practicality that is integrated within the mystery school of Isis. Like, Isis is not divorced from the struggles of human life, and she is really, really meeting them head on. And she is there to be a kind of like strength for us within our own daily trials and tribulations of our hero's path, our heroine's path, our journey, to help us meet life as it's arising and in alignment with, divine law, divine order, divine grace, and the stewardship of the creation according to the divine will, you might say, of which you are becoming. Like, you yourself become one with that divine will. You're learning to anchor it. And that's what the king or the queen is in its highest archetype. I really, really like to make that distinction because, because there's a lot of conflation, first and foremost, with Eastern traditions, with kind of all sacred sexuality practices. And a lot of what I've seen being reborn in neo-tantric communities looks to me more like fertility goddess rituals, like large orgiastic rituals. That is a fertility goddess practice. That's not necessarily an Eastern tantric practice, but it's definitely something that was a part of certain of the Western fertility goddess rituals. And there's nobody really out there teaching the underlying kind of like spiritual laws of the fertility goddess traditions, which help hold practices like that in a way that they are a blessing completely to community and completely to life, rather than being something that that causes degradation in some cases. So let's talk about the king and the queen. Here we have the hieroglyphics for Isis and Osiris's names. You'll see here this hieroglyphic is the hieroglyphic for the throne. So Isis, her name is literally the throne, who's the bringer of the heavenly bread. This is the symbol for bread. So the throne that brings the nourishment, that brings the life force, that brings the sustenance to the world in the form of woman. And Osiris is also the throne that brings the all-seeing, the guidance, the eye of Ra, the one that can lead, guide, direct, because he can see in the form of man. So let's just talk about this, these king and the queen archetypes. So first of all, they are associated with a seat of power. They are associated with our seat of power, our throne, which is our creative energy, which is our womb, our hara, our lower belly center here. Our sexual energy is the seat of our creative, physical creative power. So the most raw, defined form of masculine and feminine energy of creative power. And when the two come together, obviously you have the infinite extension of life through propagation of the species, through the physical act of conceiving a child again and again and again. But then there's also the spiritual power of when these energies are brought together and how they can steward spiritually all life in the creation and in the universe. So the king and the queen archetypes underlie the sex magic of Isis. They represent the masculine and the feminine power of the seat of creation or the throne, which is the foundation of both Isis and Osiris's names. So let's look at the king. The king, or masculine sexual power, which is associated with Isis. Number one, the ancient Egyptians saw the father as being of the earth element, and they saw the mother as being the sky. So masculine power, because it's of earth, it is focused on material accomplishment. It is focused practically. It's more grounded, masculine hormones, masculine sexual power. It has a grounding energy. It has a practical energy. It has a focus on wanting to accomplish and create things in the physical dimensions. Now, that's one of its aspects. The other aspect, if we're really looking at the Isis and Osiris mysteries, is that Osiris is a conqueror of death. He is the one that faces death, that walks through the portal of death and comes out the other side. This is also deeply related to and connected to male fertility power. The archetype of male sexual power is really truly the warrior, who we see more in the form of Horus. And the idea underlying the warrior is that to be a warrior, we must be able to face death without flinching, without fear, and to be able to truly, truly hold our ground. This is the path of Osiris and Horus. So it's a rite of initiation, because if a man is waffling in the face of all the crazy dance of creation, and he doesn't, and he's going to be thrown off his game because of different forces which might bring up fear in him, which might bring up that fear of death, he's not going to be able to hold the power of his throne. So the cultivation practices for men are really, really focused on that ground, strengthening that grounded, that practical, that materially accomplishing element of the divine king, of him being able to conquer death. Some say, you know, like the Shiva Lingam is like him who has already died. He has already died to all the forces of the creation. He's not going to be moved by them. And in that, he becomes a pillar, pillar of consciousness, a pillar of strength, like the lingam. And now he can be the warrior. Really, the king is like the ascended form of the warrior. So he can really protect the creation. That is the masculine throne of power. Let's go to the feminine. So the queen, or the feminine sexual power of Isis, is actually cultivated through her sky nature. Okay. She is of the spirit. She is of the sky. Think about Isis with her wings. Also, think about women. Think about how women tend to be more intuitive, tend to be able to feel things maybe intuitively before they happen. They tend to be more fluid. They tend to be more like almost like soft and yielding. So the feminine power is actually cultivated through this emptiness and through this sky nature and through the sky mysteries, which if we just start to look at like a foundational feminine sex magic practice, cultivating your basic throne of power. Usually a woman is going to start with practices that are based in the womb, practices that are based in understanding her hormonal system and how that sexual energy and that sexual cycle, that cycle of energy is working. And through, through her womb magic, through the blood mysteries, for me, the first time I ever offered my blood to the earth, I gave that drop of blood and I felt the power of magic. And the more I did that month by month, the more I found myself starting to align with these cycles of space and these cycles of time. And I wasn't an astrologer. I didn't study these things. I would just find that I was always in perfect alignment with what the planets were doing if I maintained my basic cultivation practice. So there's an element of the female sexual body temple and how it works that actually gives us attunement to the sky and to the celestial realms. And that is the foundation of a woman's power. That is the foundation of priestess power. It is about opening to the spirit and being a vessel for the spirit. And then, like here with the bread, from the spirit, being able to bring the nourishment through. And of course, in the most basic sense of sexual consciousness, that is the birth of a child. That is the nursing of the child. We are literally bringing the spiritual power into ourselves as then the bread of life, as then the next generation, as then the nurturing of that next generation through nursing, right? So it's the generation of the sweetness that soothes and that nourishes and that kind of fills the creation and ourselves with manna. What can I say? With bread from heaven, with manna. We are the manna generators. And we're also meant to be that bridge of bringing in and attuning the physical to the spiritual. And then finally, I would say that ultimately the power of the queen, if we looked and we said, oh, the power of the masculine, the male sexual power, it's based in the warrior and it's based in the power of death. It's based in the power to end what needs to be ended and to not be afraid of death so you can overcome it. and maintain the strength and the protection of the creation, the female sexual power is really based in life and in the bringing forth of life, and ultimately in the manifestation of the creation, the manifesting power of the creatrix. And so, as female bodied beings, that is what we are cultivating in our foundational power and the foundational throne that we sit on. So sex magic intentionally works with the cultivation of these energies of Osiris and Isis, of the masculine and the feminine throne, to generate spells and states of consciousness. And, a lot of sex magic practice is also focused on, really just honoring the power of the two thrones. You'll see the ritual devotion to the lingam, the ritual devotion to the yoni. There is genital worship that is a part of that. And one of the things we find in sacred sexuality is that our throne, our body itself, our hormones, our sexual energy itself is our temple, and it becomes our initiator. So this is also about really recognizing the power within your body temple, and in some ways within the matrix and the matter of creation itself, as a guide, as a temple, as an initiator into who you are. And so the ultimate cultivation of this male power and this female power is in the union, what we might call the Heros Gamos ritual of bringing them together. And from there, the generation of the fields of grace, which can really anchor and steward the creation. So I'm just going to shift here into the universal mysteries of the Isis temples. So the Isis Mystery School is a mystery school of the Divine Mother, which is ultimately devoted to the power of as the greatest force in creation. So Isis is known as the high magician. And this is because as a woman, when you are in full mastery of your throne of creation, your feminine sexual power, you become the great creatrix. And the great creatrix is the one that understands the hidden laws of the sky, of the celestial realms, of how this solar system is functioning. This is why Isis is often communicating with Thoth, the god of wisdom of the higher planes. And Thoth sometimes teaches her, because through her sexual energy, through her throne, she has opened to the laws, the cycles, the rhythms, the workings, the secret name of Ra, the secret name of the sun god, of how everything is working. And so she knows that. She knows that secret name of Ra, and she's the most powerful magician because of that. But when we look deeper into what she reveals to us, is that it's not just being a magician in the way Thoth is a magician just because he knows all the laws and he works kind of in a detached manner. Isis brings something else in. She knows all the laws of the creation, but she is also the lover, and she is also the mother. And so she has also discovered what the most powerful force in the creation is. And that most powerful force is the force of love. And so from the love that she has for Osiris, she is able to work miracles. From the love that she has for Horus, that she has for her people, that she has for her civilization, she is able to overcome this insanely chaotic, chaos-causing force known as Set. Later in the Christian tradition, it became Satan. So she is able to overcome that. So really her mystery school in its deepest level, yes, we learn about magic and we learn about the planets and we learn about astrology and we learn about our bodies as women and we learn about, the sacred practices to steward that sacred consciousness through our bodies. But ultimately, if we look at the deeper theme, at the root of the mystery school is the unconquerable power of love. And that we are really, really, truly being initiated into that, because that's the highest force in the creation. We might even say that's the secret name of Ra. That's the secret force ruling everything. And it's more powerful than all of the other forces. So the Isis Mystery School concerns the way this power of love is held in everything and in everyone. How it is the secret mechanism of the creation and the source of all magic. So when we come into sacred sexuality through the mother, through Isis, this is the essence of her mystery school. It is a mystery school of the power of love. And there is also a deep significance in the way this power of love is held through the womb matrix, the bloodlines of mankind, which are held through the wombs of women. So these are the mysteries of the red thread or the knot of Isis. The red thread in ancient cultures symbolized marriage. So when you tied the red thread in a knot with your beloved, that became your marriage bond. Now, people look at this is the Tiet, this is the knot of Isis, and they forget this. They don't know about the red thread. And they'll also associate it with the menstrual rites and the menstrual mysteries, which is also true, because there's another red thread that is between you and your mother who birthed you. And so we have these red threads that move through the body of mankind. When we make love with another human being, we create that red thread. And so the priestesses of Isis were the ones who stewarded these red knots through the creation, because sometimes, sometimes those knots need healing. Sometimes those bonds need to be purified. Sometimes those bonds need to be released. Sometimes those bonds need to be revealed to us. Our beloved needs to be called in. So we were the stewards of that red thread of the love matrix between mothers and fathers, and then mothers and children's, and how that's generating the body of human life. Another aspect of the Isis mysteries is also around the conception, the bringing forth, how the body of creation is bringing forth advanced souls, essentially, the divine hero, Heru within us. These are the living avatars and the kings and the sacred warriors and leaders of humankind. We've seen so many of them be initiated. Where are they initiated? They're initiated in Egypt. Jesus was initiated in Egypt. Moses was initiated in Egypt. Joseph was initiated in Egypt. Alexander the Great received his empowerment through Egypt. They might not live the whole time in Egypt, but they are born, they are refined, they become that divine hero through the power of the matrix within Egypt. Leonardo da Vinci, Egypt. I could just go on and on. There's actually so many truly kind of heroic luminary warrior types of beings that came out of Egypt and received their empowerments really truly through Egypt. And this is also part of the Isis temple. This is part of the Isis mystery. She is the birther of the heroic or the highest potential aspect within our human embodiment. And so her mysteries teach us how to become our highest potential ourselves. And then what I would also say is that a lot of the oldest sex magics of the temples of Isis were actually devoted to conceiving these high souls, bringing advanced souls into the creation to support, as Mary obviously did with Jesus. I will say in this present day time, because there's other temples around the world that are very similar to Isis, and one of those is like the temples of Ichel in Mexico. And I have met women alive on the planet today that had activation in those types of divine conception codes and really, really, truly conceived miraculously and conceived very beautiful souls. Unfortunately, the fields of the earth, and this is something we're going to get into more when we get into magic, the fields of the earth right now, because you have like 95% or 99% of human beings have a certain reality threshold that they're operating in, certain level of belief systems that they're operating in. And so sometimes we can't do as powerful of magic as we used to be able to do maybe 5,000, 7,000 years ago, because there's a density now in the collective consciousness of humanity. And so much of the Isis mysteries in particular were collectively damned. So they've been literally from not necessarily our consciousness, but a lot from the Abrahamic faiths, a lot of curse magic put into the earth, and a lot of density on top of that over many thousands of years. So there are some troubles when you might not be able to take your staff and throw it on the ground and make it into a snake anymore, as they once were able to do in ancient Egypt. So I can get into that more maybe later, but magic is real. Egypt is the land of magic, and Isis will also be initiating you into magic, into real magic. And that's one of my favorite aspects of her mystery school. I put this together in part with our first Temple Arts of Sacred Union facilitator training, and in part from really sitting with Isis's main temple, which is in Aswan. It's on an island in the middle of the Nile called the Temple of Isis Philae. And what you'll see about the Egyptian temples is that they have 7 gates. There's 7 gates. They're literally gates. and you pass through one gate, you get into one part of the temple, and then you pass through another gate and you get into the next part of the temple, and so on and so forth. Usually the seventh gate is hidden. So the inner sanctum, crossing through the sixth gate, you get to the inner sanctum of the temple. And then there's a hole in the ceiling, and the seventh gate is upwards. It's the full ascension rite. So I want to just explain this a little bit, like how it worked in ancient times, because essentially priests and priestesses had access codes to the different parts of the temple. So not everybody could go into that inner sanctum. In fact, it was only the high priest, the high priestess, the queen, or the pharaoh who could go into the sixth gate, the inner mystery. So what I want to say about the Isis temples is that these gateways, you would have to have specific initiations. Once you had those initiations, once those rituals were complete, then you would have access to the first gate of the temple. Then you could serve in that area of the temple. But to go deeper into the temple, you would have to have the next series of initiations and so on and so forth. So these are actually based on the temple itself. So the first gate of the Isis temple in Philae is the gate of essentially the conception, the divine conception. So it's very, very deeply based around fertility, love, motherhood, and fertility practices and sacred conception practices. So in this gate, in the Isis mysteries, we sort of begin, we're initiated to the path by really learning about our hormonal system, our bodies, a lot of the womb healing, the blood mysteries, the offering of moon blood, the attunement of if you're in a female body, the attunement of the womb to the sky and the planetary and the celestial realms, learning how to bring in the codes from those realms, learning how to work with sacred time, learning how to work with ritual space, opening sacred space, closing sacred space. This is all like the first level of the Isis mysteries. And we will generally follow this template in our training, because you have to master that first. And so then you go into the second gate of the temple, which is very, very deeply devoted to the path of healing and the mysteries and the rites of health and healing disease, and especially a lot of Isis's practices are rooted in transmutation. So the foundations of alchemy, the foundations of transmuting poisons, the foundation of transmuting death into life. Once you've mastered that element, now you can essentially open into the path of magic, because if you can't transmute the death force, if you can't bring the death force into the life force, you're going to have some problems once you start working with the path of ritual magic. So magic is the third gateway of the temple, and it's now you've learned about the basic forces of the creation. Now you're going to go into learning about the different paths of magic. I would say Isis is really a master in every kind of magic. There's not any type of magic that she isn't skilled in. And this is also where the sex magic practices come in. So this is also where, if if we're learning sacred sexuality, we would start with the foundational practices of our throne of power and fertility. We would then move into health and healing, clearing our womb, transmuting energies within our bodies that are from past relationships, that are negative belief systems about ourselves, about sexual energy, about sex, trauma, all these things, transmuting trauma, opening up space, restoring that life force energy. And then we would start to move into more of the ritual arts that you could do with a partner, with yourself, or potentially even in groups of sacred, sensual, sacred sexual expression. And then we would move into the mysteries of the twin flame. So the fourth gate of the actual temple of Isis in Philae, it has a secret passageway to the roof. And so this was the part of the temple where all the rituals, there's a temple to Osiris on the roof of the Isis temple. And that temple also looks at the sacred, another island with a mountain, Bige Island, where Osiris's heart was found. And so in this gate of the temple, and then also the interdimensional temple, is when we begin the practices of really opening and healing our heart and learning about love and learning about sacred relationships, which I'm going to get more into that, why the twin flame is here, what the twin flame is, because there's a lot of distortion about that. Isis and Osiris were twins, and they really are the encodement of the twin flame mystery, along with Nephthys and Set, who are also their brothers and sisters. So there's shadow twin, and then there's the light twins. And so most people who are having twin flame experiences are actually in the interdimensional temple of Isis. Maybe they had initiation in other lives. And I've seen a lot of people getting really, really lost and really, really confused in those experiences. So I will be going into that more, but essentially, this is where we're learning to cultivate the power of love, cultivate the power of our heart, and also really, really deepening into the power of the soul family and the oversoul, and what it's like to be in relationship with someone from your oversoul versus maybe like an ordinary sexual union. There is a big, big, big difference. And there's a lot of power that can come through those relationships. So a lot of times this gate is also about preparing to receive that, or healing our hearts from past experiences where maybe we weren't able to anchor that union fully. Now, we are only going to go into about the fifth gate in the Isis temple training. And that's because the fifth gate is the celestial womb, the queen of heaven, the mysteries of the cosmic mother, which is where we will close our container. From this gate is then the birthing of Horus. Okay. And so we move more into the mysteries of maybe what we might call the Christ, or the divine masculine. So I'm not going to go into that in this presentation. I'm just mostly showing you this so you can understand the pathway, the gates that we pass in these rites of initiation, because they will be applied in our training that I'll introduce you to at the end. Briefly, I'm going to go through just the Isis temples on Earth and what happened. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I also know most of us who are attracted to the Isis mysteries, who are attracted to ancient Egypt, it's because of our past lives. Like, let's be real. Egypt has some kind of phenomenon, and it's not just us, whether they call us New Age or whatever they call us in this time, where we're interested in Egypt, and there's this connection between past lives and Egypt. I had no interest in learning about Egypt or anything, and no interest in past lives. Literally, one of my lives came forward and almost grabbed me and was like, you need to go here. Egypt has a phenomenon about it where a lot of people all throughout time, like even hundreds of years ago, when they would visit Egypt, the soul and the remembrances of the soul start to come forward. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that is, but because I know so many people are here because they have soul connections, because they were connected to histories and potentially traumas of those histories, I'm going to go through a little bit about the historical temples of Isis for the sake of your own identification and healing, and then recognize, however, that the sex magic of Isis that at least I'm holding and that I'm teaching today is really connected to the universal temple of the soul and spirit, not necessarily to any of the ancient temples, because they could have even had individual rites and practices at different temples in different countries. So, what happened to the Isis temples? So, Isis, it's really important you know that Isis was around in a very, very potent time of religious warfare. And again, at that time, Isis was one of the most popular cults or temples in the world. Maybe I'll just fast forward to that slide here. Yeah, let me just say this. So, Isis was extremely popular. She was worshipped in North Africa, the Middle East, the Mediterranean, and all across Europe. This is what I want to give you guys the idea. Now, this is just from what archaeology has either discovered based on ruins or based on records. Like maybe they found a stone tablet that referenced a temple of Isis being there. In reality, there's probably much more. But so you understand how many Isis temples there were in the world, archaeological records indicate that there were at least 36 temples of Isis all across Egypt and Nubia, so present-day Sudan and Ethiopia. There were 28 temples in Greece and all across the Greek islands. I've been to a few of them. There were 3 Isis temples in Turkey. There were 4 Isis temples in Spain. There were 3 Isis temples in Libya. There were 11 temples to Isis in Italy. This is when I started getting like really kind of wilded out, because my grandmother, who came from Naples, there was a very big Isis temple in the city where my Italian grandmother was from. So 11 temples in Italy, 9 temples in England. 9, that's a lot in England. So look how far she got. 5 temples in France. Some people say Paris, the capital of France, was named because there was a big Isis temple there in ancient times along the Seine River. So they called the tribes that lived in that area the Parisis, the ones that live. Par is by Isis, Parisis, the Parisis. Literally, the name of Paris means by the Isis temple. 2 temples in Germany. at least one temple in Austria, Hungary, Malta, Portugal, Romania, Syria, Byblos, Lebanon, Jordan, and Tunisia. And likely there were many, many more. So Isis was truly pervasive. They call her the goddess of 10,000 names. When you're thinking about the time when the Romans, had conquered Jerusalem, they were occupying Egypt, the big Roman Empire, Isis's temples are everywhere. And then you have the new Christian religion being born, and it's starting to become more and more popular. And once Rome became Christian, which I think happened sometime maybe close to 300 AD, then there was a lot of religious warfare. There was a lot of religious warfare between the temples of Isis and the early Christians. And then by the time you get into the 4th century, then there was destruction. So ultimately, the temples of Isis were destroyed. When the Roman Empire became Christian, the temples, their priests and priestesses were often brutally raped, massacred, or exiled in that process. And so these are famous works of art, literally depicting this, that we have throughout history, depicting the rape of temple priestesses, depicting, the chaos in the destruction of Alexandria, the burning of the library, all of these things. So the last temple to Isis, which is the temple in Philae that I like to go to, it was known as the last stronghold of the pagan faith. So of all the temples, of all the Egyptian temples, Isis was the last temple standing. And so she was the last stronghold of the pagan faith, and it shut its doors in around 500 AD. And so there is a prophecy that was held in an underground coven of Isis that was actually based in Europe, that this mother, that Isis would sleep for about 1500 years, 1500 to 1600 years, because the temple was really being repressed before 500 AD. So that this temple would sleep for 1500 years, and that the mother would return. And when would she return? She returns in our time. And to be honest, she has returned already. So the date of the prophecy was January 12th, 2020. This was the date of the great Saturn-Pluto conjunction that, really is bringing the discipline of karmic retribution, Saturn, to the Plutonian shadow of the world's underworld. So this is the moment the mother is going to be let out of hiding, let out of the underworld. And of course, she did come in. She came in as Sekhmet during that time. And it is part of our age, to really, really support the integration of her consciousness again in the planet. And I think also be embracing her magics, be embracing your magic as a healer, your magic as a ritual priest or priestess, as someone who can actually be supporting humanity right now, because we're at another potential fall of civilization, using these ancient healing rituals of Isis. So how do you know if you are an Asian initiate? As I said, there's a lot about the Isis temples and really Egypt in general, where so many people, and you can go into historic records, it's not just us. This has been happening all over time. People go to Egypt and they have this memory. They have these memories of another time, of another age, of another lifetime. It's a phenomenon. It's a phenomenon across the world. I don't know if there's any other place on earth that has so many people feel like they remember past lives more than Egypt. But one of the reasons that we as Icean initiates might remember our lifetimes or have encodements and activations from temple initiations and past lives carry over is because there's an element of the Isis mysteries that is really devoted to overcoming the power of death. And Isis and Osiris being Lord of the Dead, and Isis being sort of the resurrectionist, the one that can restore you and bring you back to life. There's a part of their mystery school, and even I would say a part of the sacred sexual mysteries of Isis, which is bringing us into the contact with us, the part of ourselves that is eternal, that is immortal, that is beyond the cycle. And we're actually learning to bring that eternal soul consciousness into our present day embodiment. And as part of that, there is sometimes healing that has to take place through the subconscious mind of the impressions, of the traumas of the past lives in order to make room for that integration. And so, because of this aspect of the Isis mysteries, there is a propensity for those of us that are Icean to be connected to and to be aware of instances of other lifetimes, and also hopefully to have that connection to an eternal part of us that is beyond all the lifetimes. I really recommend this article. I'm not gonna go through it fully, but if you're wondering if you are an Isis initiate, I wrote an article called 10 Signs That You Are a Reincarnated Sacred Sexual Priestess. You can go to returnofthetemple.com and put this in 10-signs you are a reincarnated sacred sexual priestess. I'm going to open it up. So it's here on my website. If you go to blog, you can also find it there. I'm not going to go through all of these signs because that will take quite a bit of time. But what I will say is that look at these first and see if there is a resonance here. And then I'm going to talk about signs that are unique to the temples of Isis. So you might relate to the sacred sexual priestess archetype or the sacred sexual priest archetype, but maybe that was held more through the temples of Aphrodite, or maybe it was held through the temples of Inanna. What does it look like for there to be a unique affiliation with the Isis temples? So first and foremost, if you're attracted to Isis, if you're attracted to ancient Egypt, if you're attracted to Hathor, and I might even say if you're particularly afraid of them, as I was afraid of the Egyptian goddesses when they first came to me. So it can also be having a strong fear of them, which usually indicates a trauma. But if you're attracted to the goddesses of ancient Egypt, or if you have a very deep connection to Mother Mary or Mary Magdalene, this is the lineage of Isis. So that is one way that you can know that there is a past life connection to the Isis temples. The other thing, I know I talked about this, but the Isis temples are really, truly unique when it comes to the mysteries of the twin soul and twin flame. One second. And this is actually present in Egypt today. So when I met my husband, Hassan, he started telling me about all the different types of twin souls and had all these Arabic names for them. You know, today in Egypt, when twins are born in his village and all across Egypt, they know that if they don't do some special ritual at the time they're born, that those souls then shapeshift. They jump into the bodies of cats like every Thursday night before the temple, before not temple, but mosque. I'm telling you, there's so much magic still alive in Egypt today. Um, you will look, most Egyptian deities are in pairs, are in twos. They were, the monarchies there was a lot of brother and sister marriages. So, and then there's Isis, Osiris, Set, and Nephthys. So it's my opinion, from what I found, is that most of the people in that have had a twin flame experience or a twin flame activation that brought you to the spiritual path, or that brought you into the underworld to do that whole underworld work and initiation. In many I'm almost 100% certain that anybody that has had that type of an experience is an Icean initiate on a soul level, because these are specific. These are specific to the Isis temples. The other thing that I would say is unique about Isis is because she has also a long period of her life where Osiris is on the other side and she is just with her son Horus. There can also be like very, very sacred relationships between mothers and sons. That can also be a sign of being an Icean initiate. And also, too, I've seen like a lot of much younger men. If a woman has the Icean priestess in her, and especially if she's cultivating that, you will see younger men being attracted to women that carry the Isis codex. And in some cases, those are where there's more soul lessons and teachings that are opening through the Isis Horus codes between them. And I'm just saying this because I know sometimes women feel confused or they feel ashamed about that, and like, why is this 20-year-old and I'm in my 40s, and I don't, is this right or is this wrong? Should I do this or not? I'm just like, I've seen it. A lot of Icean priestesses are very attractive to much younger men, and you can even have sacred relationships manifest with an older, woman, a younger man, that are part of your cultivation on this path. So be aware of that. And then finally, I will say, if you have had supernatural experiences with magic, enchantments, love spells, weather magic, plant, animal magic, if magic is a part of who you are, if you attract cat familiar spirits, if you're the cat lady, if you love cats, all of this is very, very, very Egyptian. So I was reading recently, just doing some research into early Islamic history, and I was reading some firsthand accounts from essentially like Christian priests in Syria. And they kept talking about Egypt as the land of witches and the center of witchcraft. So Egypt today still has very, very powerful magic. Magic like shape-shifting, like lights appearing, Mother Mary appearing all over Egypt. The land is just, it's filled with magic, the whole land. And so if there's a very, very deep draw to magic specifically, and even if you feel some more of the witch archetype within you, or more of the sorceress archetype within you, or the sorcerer or the warlock within you, a lot of that ultimately, like, it made it into Europe, but basically a lot of it is more deeply connected. If you go all the way back, it's connected, its root is in Egypt. And its root is also in Africa. I mean, Africa still, there's magic practiced all over Africa. So if you feel that connection to magic, this can also be a sign of being an Isean initiate, because Isis was the high magician. So now I'd like to speak about re-empowerment in the temple arts of Isis within this time. We are truly, truly living in a profound age. It is an age that has been prophesied for many thousands of years by many different spiritual traditions around the planet. It is the prophecy of the eagle and the condor learning to fly together again, the people of the East and the West, the two cultures coming together again, the indigenous and the technological civilization coming together again. For the Abrahamic traditions, this is what they would call the end times, or the end of ages. And in many ways, at least for that tradition, it is the end of the Abrahamic cycle of time. There is a significant need for us to graduate into a new understanding, a new way of relating within diversity. So a lot of the spiritual power of lost ancient traditions is coming back forward. At least in the Western world, it's coming back forward at this time. And for the temples of Isis and for the temples of Hathor and a lot of the lost goddess traditions, this is the age of what we call the return of the mother principle. So January 12th, 2020 was the official date that was prophesied for the return of Isis to the planet. So we are 4 years in to that transformation. We can see that there is a lot of chaos in the world today, particularly in the realm of what I call the throne, or the battle for the throne, which is specifically the realm that Isis is a healer for. Okay, Isis is the throne, and she is the restorer of the throne. And so there is a role. There is most definitely a role for those of you who feel a connection to Isis, and you feel a connection to these lost temple arts, and you feel a connection to these practices of high magic that are guarded in the traditions of Isis and Hathor. We truly, truly have a calling. Like, our soul group has a specific calling at this point in time. And I'd like to illuminate a bit more what that calling is. So generally speaking, the there was an understanding in the ancient Egyptian temples that the end of one age and the beginning of another is the most powerful time for realization in the mysteries. So, number one, if at any point your soul took initiation or had activations in the temples of Isis, and really truly in a lot of the ancient goddess tradition temples, you may be finding that in particular with this life, there is an urgency, there is a longing, there is something really calling you back to this wisdom and back to the wisdom of your body, the wisdom of love, the wisdom of fertility, the wisdom of how to progress through the cycles of creation and destruction. Remember, these goddesses, one of the most significant powers that they have is that they're able to take us, they're able to guide us through underworlds, they're able to guide us through um wars, they're able to guide us through ages of destruction, times of destruction, and they're able to bring forth rebirth on the other side. And so, what I have seen is that so many people in, neo-tantric, sacred sexuality, and even just alternative spirituality spaces, I've just seen so much, um, essentially, you know, like powerful like meetings with soul relationships that kind of blow the lid off of the life that you thought you knew, whether you want to call that a twin flame activation or whether you want to call it something else. We've seen these connections, we've seen these sacred relational configurations coming back forward. We've seen people, because now our society has lifted the lid on sexual expression, we're seeing people, with a huge longing to explore their sexuality, to explore gender, to explore relationships, also because of all the trauma that has built up in our lineages. There's this huge longing to grow in this regard. And there's also a lot of dysfunction that's still running, and a lot of indulgence, and a lot of getting into challenging situations, maybe getting into not so healthy relationships because of that, and not a lot of really, really powerful, rooted guidance, as well as we're living in an age of mass mystery illnesses, hormonal health issues, chronic fatigue, all of these things that are in many, many ways, especially for those that have, female hormones and female embodiment. A lot of that is being manifested from living out a balance with the cycles and the laws of Neter, or the laws of nature, and your own unique physical embodiment. And so the Isis mysteries have so much to offer humanity at this time. They have so much to offer us in the way of healing. They have so much to offer us in the way of restoring our lineages. They have so much to offer us in the way of sacred relationships and navigating all of the special spiritual types of relationships that are manifesting at this particular time. And they also have a lot to offer us in the way of purpose, because these are traditions And when you really, really open into the mysteries of Isis, the mysteries of Hathor in a bigger way, when you become an embodiment of those mysteries, a facilitator of those ceremonies, a facilitator of their healing work and of their magic, these are the specific rites, these are the specific pathways that are desperately needed in order to actually almost like midwife society through destruction and rebirth, which is exactly what we are going through on a collective level. So, with that calling put forward, I want to invite you into two very special, it's really one opportunity, but there's two levels of commitment, okay? I'd like to invite you into a very special opportunity to be re-empowered in the sacred sexual mysteries of Isis, to be a holder of the sex magic of Isis. And also, if you want to be a teacher, if you want to be accredited to pass this on to others, to practice temple arts work, build a career in this particular skill. Also, I'd like to invite those of you who feel that calling to be a facilitator into the training opportunities that we have in 2025 to be a holder of the Isis mysteries and also the Hathor mysteries. So we're going to go over that now. Starting next month, we are going to be opening the pathways of reinitiation in the sex magic of Isis. So I'm just going to share my screen here. You can go to returnofthetemple.com/sex-magic-of-Isis to get to this page. So the invitation is for you to join me in a 3-month initiation in the sex magic of Isis, in these mysteries. And I'm going to scroll down. If you want to see a full overview of our content, you can click on this button here to see a full overview of the content. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna I'm going to share this more with you face to face. So, the sex magic of Isis, these are the sacred sexual practices, the sacred sexual rites of divine union. So, there are cultivation practices specifically for both men and women. You can do this on your own. You can also do this if you are in relationship with your partner. And what these rites do is they take you through the pathway first and foremost of really embodying your throne, embodying the seat of your creative power, of your life force energy, and clearing in that process, really releasing unhealthy, stuck, or blocked energy, emotions, ancestral trauma, past relationships, things that you might not even realize are greatly, greatly affecting you. And maybe that's showing up in the realm of love and relationships, and maybe it's showing up in other ways. Maybe it's showing up in terms of your health. Maybe it's showing up in terms of your lack of inspiration, lack of creative purpose in your life. Maybe it could be showing up through self-worth in your relationship to money. These are practices that bring you into the seat of your power and teach you how to work with that energy as a form of revitalization, as a form of healing, and also as a form of creation, manifestation in your life. And so we will be going first and foremost very deeply into the mysteries of Isis, being empowered in those mysteries. So, this sex magic of Isis is a formal initiation. And what initiation really meant in the ancient world and in the ancient mystery schools is it's an induction into a spiritual lineage. So, it's attuning you to the power of Isis, to be an embodiment of her, and um, for your own soul to receive the activation in the power, in the magic, and in the wisdom of Isis on that inner level. And that's primarily done through ritual, it's primarily done through ceremonial transmission and also wisdom teachings. So we will be going into all of the foundation of the wisdom teachings and the empowerments of the Isis mysteries, which are actually bigger than just sacred sexuality. So we're going to be going into her mysteries, really doing a deep journey with Isis herself and receiving ourselves as Isis or as Osiris, as the divine forms of the throne of power, of the throne of masculine and feminine power. And then we will be working in a 5-week sacred ceremonial process during the ritual time. There was a month-long time, and it kind of goes from about, the first week of December into the first week of January. It was about a month long where these were the big festivals for the resurrection of Osiris, the rites of sacred union, and the divine conception of Horus. This is when all those festivals took place in ancient Egypt. So during those 5 weeks, a little bit over 1 month, we are going to be receiving all of the sacred sexual practices, embodying them, all of the sacred sexual teachings and practices, and working with them in the context of a spiritual container facilitated by the Blue Lotus and by Isis. So the Blue Lotus is the flower that is sacred to Isis. Lapis lazuli, blue is her sacred color. And, one of the things that Isis opens up for us is she really opens up that principle of the water element, that principle of emotional healing, that principle of the cooling, soothing blue currents, the blue currents within us. I know I'm wearing red. She does have connection with red. Red was a little bit more of a color for Hathor, but Isis's main color is blue, and her main flower is the blue lotus. And really, what the power of the lotus does, because it grows in the murky water, it grows in the murky kind of underbelly of water element, of our emotional consciousness, of our liquid consciousness. And it doesn't actually like clear water. It likes the dark water. So, whatever you're coming in with, whatever you're in with in your heart, in your emotional body, in your energy bodies, the Blue Lotus is able to alchemize all of that into the power of, I guess you could say, purity. The Blue Lotus is associated a lot with purity. It's associated with, an aphrodisiac. We're able to work with all that energy to bring forward our life force energy, to bring forward sacred pleasure, to learn how to flow gently with all that is within us again. And these are some of the empowerments that are needed to really open the pathways of fertility and to really open the pathways of intimacy and to really open the pathways of, particularly, yes, the feminine sexual energy. But to be honest, we have a lot of male sexual energy. That energy hasn't been as repressed over these last couple of thousand years as the feminine throne has been repressed. So, what you will find is that when male sexual energy becomes dysfunctional, in a lot of ways, it's because of the loss of the feminine throne that also we see the male throne fall as well. Remember, Isis will restore. When you open the currents of the Isis mysteries, it's going to naturally restore the male throne as well. And so I'm calling people in to go on that journey, to go on this inner journey over this sacred time through the resurrection of Osiris and the sacred union and the divine conception time, which is now, of course, the Christmas time in the Christian tradition and the New Year in our Western tradition. But really, a lot of that derives from the the lost civilization that came before us and the lost fertility religions that came before us. And so this is going to be a time of really deep miracles, really deep healing work, really deep opening of the ecstatic currents, healing of our hearts, calling in, because it's also going to be conception. If there's anything that you want to call in, that you want to create in your life, this is also an extraordinarily powerful time for that. So we will be going through those sacred sexual rites into the beginning of January. And then, if you are called to be a facilitator, if you want this to be an activation for you to be offering, also teaching, also these practices, these mysteries, and also holding sacred ceremony and actually working with the high Egyptian magic rites in your own life, we also are going to have a facilitator training. So I'm going to pull that up next. I'm sorry, let me just, I think I have it pulled up somewhere. Here it is. Okay. So if you go to returnofthetemple.com/temple-training, you can see the Temple Arts of Sacred Union. This is our facilitator training. Embrace your calling as a facilitator of the Arthurian Isis mysteries in the heart of ancient Egypt. Be immersed in hands-on training and initiation in the rites of sky. These are the space holding and the spiritual healing mysteries. We're going to be training in the Akashic records, in energy work, in the principle of sky, the principle of space, which is the foundational feminine power element, and how to construct and hold sacred spaces as a facilitator. the rites of the sun. This is working with the divine light, working with the principles of the divine, what you might call the divine father, the spiritual hierarchy, the laws and the higher spiritual laws which govern our particular planet, this experience of consciousness that we're in our star system, and all of the hidden laws and rights and pathways that guide the soul and the spirit through this dimension. We'll then be moving in and actually visiting, the temples of Hathor, the temples of Isis, doing ceremonial work in these temples as we open up the ancient fertility goddess mysteries of womb and sacred sexuality. So, womb healing, sacred sex, plant and earth magic. This is the whole heart of the Hathorian Isis tradition. We'll be learning how to facilitate sensual ceremonies, facilitate land healing ceremonies, and to teach the fertility goddess mysteries, particularly the sex magic of Isis practices that we will also be learning in the 3-month initiation. Then we'll be going, of course, we cannot skip it, but into the empowerments in the underworld, the empowerments in the rites of death, dying, alchemy, and transfiguration, rebirth. Now, I will be teaching specifically the alchemical arts, and I sometimes call them the demon taming arts, because you need to know those if you are going to be a spiritual healer, if you are going to be, especially if you're going to be working with land or you're going to be working with people's bodies and people's sexuality. This is where a lot of our quote unquote worst demons lie. So we need to be empowered in meeting trauma. We need to be empowered in how to do shadow work, how to empower others in shadow work, how to transform energies that have become afflicted in any way, shape, or form, energies that are in what antagonism within ourselves and within others, and also energies in the land that are like that. This is so key because this is where a lot of our lost power and our lost life force are. And you cannot really truly be a holder of the erotic current at all in as a medicine. You can't be a holder of the erotic current if you're not able to work with the lower dimensional realms. So I specialize in demon taming, and we're also going to be going and visiting the Temple of Osiris and getting the rites of death doulaship and guiding people through loss, guiding people through death, guiding people through destruction, because there is a lot of that. There is a lot of that going on at this time. So that is the 4th pillar of the training. And then we will end with the rites of divine love. And we're actually going to be pilgrimaging down to the main epicenter, the main temple of Isis, which is on a beautiful island on the Nile River. And we're going to be staying in there's an island right across from the Isis temple, which is where Osiris's heart was found. And it's actually where the foundation of the old temple of Isis was. So if you can imagine, you've got Isis's temple and she's looking at her beloved's heart. The power in this part of the Nile, it's the power of love. This is where we're going to open into the rites of sacred relationship, the rites of Hieros Gamos. We're going to receive those empowerments at the Temple of Isis, and where you will be fully consecrated as an Isean priest or priestess. and in as a carrier and a holder of the Divine Mother mysteries. So this is going to be hosted at my and my husband's home in Egypt. We are we have built out on the roof our own private temple and our own private workshop space. There are 8 spots. There are 8 spots for this training. So it's an intimate training. We get a lot of one-on-one time, and it's 2 weeks. And so we're combining the training and the spiritual healing and the Akashic records in the body work, in the energy work, and in the ceremonial facilitation of these Hathorian and Isis mysteries. We're combining that with pilgrimage to all of the temples of the Neteru that are associated with each empowerment. So it's a really, really special, like once, well, it's not once in a lifetime opportunity for sure, but one thing I will say is these are the 2 training dates that are available for 2025, because in the fall I have other plans. I won't be in Egypt during the fall. So if you want to be a facilitator, we have 2 training dates for 2025. The first is going to flow right with the ending of the sex magic of Isis. So you will come in, you will do the 3 months of preparation and initiation in the sex magic of Isis mysteries, and then you will fly to Egypt and come on January 13th and immerse yourself in the training, hands-on live with me and other facilitators in Egypt. The second dates that I'm offering are in March, so March 13th through March 27th. So you can get all of the details of where we're going to go and all of what you're going to be trained in here in the training schedule. This is one for January. Just know that it will be the same for March. It's the same schedule, just different dates. Now, as part of TASU, Temple Arts of Sacred Union, as part of your investment, you will get the 3-month training in the sex magic of Isis. You will get the 2-week live training in Egypt in all of the complete Hathorian and Isis temple arts facilitator mysteries, being a facilitator of them in Egypt. And you will get ongoing access to our database. So we have a database with past videos, handouts, PDF guides, everything that you need to both integrate this for yourself and also offer it to others. So it includes all of this. Now I'm just going to go all the way down to the bottom. So the investment for this training, obviously, which includes the sex magic of Isis, the 2 weeks in Egypt, and then access to the online portal, it's $6,777. I'm doing an early bird. This is a fast action because we don't have as much time for people to decide. Last year, or I guess in 2022, we had like 3 months for people to decide. And I know it's not as much time because the sex magic of Isis is now starting October 11th. Okay. So we have about 3 weeks here. And because of that, I'm I'm discounting it 555 for those of you who know you want to come either in January or in March. You know this, you want to lock this in. You will get a $555 discount. It's good through October 4th. And again, I have a limit of 8 people for each training group. So if you know you want to come, apply. Okay, apply now. You can click this button here to apply for the training. Scroll down to the bottom of the page, fill out your application. If if we've already worked together and I already really know you and you just want to book a discovery call, say, "Hey, I'm interested. I want to come." Now this is for we've done one-on-one work together. You want to come, you can book your discovery call here. Now I do have payment links on this page. These are for people who have been accepted. So you do need to have either the call with me or go through the formal application process. Basically, once I get your application, I'm going to set up a call with you anyways. So you do have to apply and be accepted into the training. If you're interested, please do that now. And then these links are here just for when you're ready to set up. Now, we will have payment plans available. I can work out a payment plan with you. All you need to secure your spot is the same investment as if you were coming into the Sex Magic of Isis. So 1,555. It is non-refundable because we start the training and you're going to be immersed in over the next 3 months, and then we use some of that money to book things that are going to be happening here in Egypt. So it is non-refundable and you can pay the difference. We can work that out in our discovery call, and also you can pay in full. So returnofthetemple.com /temple-training. And then if you're not interested in coming to Egypt this year, but you want to be receiving these rights, you want to be empowered in the Sex Magic of Isis mysteries, you can also go to returnofthetemple.com /sex magic of Isis. Ignore this. Ignore that end. We just want to do this one here, okay? That is the URL you want to go to. So I would love, 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 love to be your guide. I would love to have you on this journey. I can tell you my own experience, like being in Egypt and working live in the land and also with Isis, very, very powerfully present, very powerfully manifesting through both my relationship with her and my husband's relationship with her, is that Isis is here to reveal really, really and truly the power of high magic. There is so much that we have forgotten about who we truly are. There is so much that we have forgotten about the power, the divine power that is within us. There is so much we have forgotten about the grace of our bodies, the grace of our sexuality, the grace of our soul family, and the grace of the magic and the power that is within us. And all I can say is that the return of this awareness, the return of this awareness is one. It is one with the birth of a new humanity. It is one with the restoration of joy, the restoration of union with the divine, the restoration of our physical embodiment, of our physical health, of our joy, of sacred family systems, of fulfilling our dreams, because the Isis mysteries are so deeply connected to um, the the king and the queen archetypes. I'm going to just close here. So because the Isis mysteries are so deeply connected to the king and the queen, what we really find is that this is ultimately about stepping into our sovereign grace as the figureheads And I mean that not in a political sense. I mean that literally, like, your consciousness is the creator, is the ruler of the reality that you are living in. And when we receive that, not so much through kind of the rabid individualism and pursuit of happiness, of like almost like a selfish kind of happiness that sometimes has come through Western consciousness in the last couple hundred years or of time. But when we receive that in deep integration with the mysteries of the womb of life, the mysteries of the web, the sacred red thread that binds us all in love and in connection to the earth and in connection to one another and in connection to the heavens, we really, really, truly find the way, the truth, the light. We find the pathway of what I call sacred union. We find the pathway of our destiny. And it's a universal destiny. It's the destiny of all life. And there is a lot connected to these mysteries that is around sacred partnership, the stewardship of land, of your I one time said when I was teaching the Isis mysteries for the first time, I'm like, basically, she wants to bring us with the divine partner, enthrone us, and anchor a temple in and through the earth. Now, that doesn't have to be a physical space, but in a lot of ways, it is the physical space of our planet. And so there's a network forming all around the world of souls who are accepting those divine rights and are accepting that pathway of royalty, that pathway of sovereignty, and that pathway of service, really and truly. So if this is you and you feel called, I hope you join us. Thank you so much for tuning in. I wish you so much love and so much blessings in the Lady of the Stars, in the Lady and the Mistress of the House of Life, and in the mysteries of divine love that are within your own heart. And so it is.